So who here has a knack for losing things? I was expecting a lot more wives to be pointing at their husbands. But I'm the kind of guy that, like, I'll lose something and it'll be, like, right in front of my face. And, like, I'm like, I can't find it. And Tara's like, it's right there. And I'm like, I can't see it. Anybody like that? Anyone with small kids, do you know who Miss Rachel is? Yes. Okay, so there was a thing. I actually did this to myself because I always do this. But there was a little thing online, and it was her, and she was just saying, where are your eyes? Point to them with me. I'm like, ooh, that's me. I don't know how to use my eyes. But if you find yourself in that area, you are not alone. Here are a couple of things that I found. On average, 100 million keys are lost in America each year. 100 million keys just in America each year. 40% of men will lose their wedding ring sometime in their life. 40%. Like, I'm glad to say I still have mine, but when I take it off, I put it in my pocket, and then it comes back out of my pocket. Like, how do you lose this? The average American spends 2.5 days a year looking for lost items. 2.5 days a year asking yourself, where did I put that? Okay, and this one's good. At JFK Airport, they add 30,000 items a month to their lost and found. 30,000 items a month. That's almost as much as we have in this little box. Who here knew that we had a lost and found? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to look through a couple of these things. If any of these things are yours, you are more than welcome to come up after service and grab them. First of all, we've got this lovely, that kind of looks like your dog, doesn't it? All right, we've got, this thing is soft. Like, man, I could use that as a blanket or a pillow. We got another lovely sweatshirt, London. Hey! I feel like we could have used this somewhat yesterday. Umbrella, anyone? I feel like I should wear this, maybe? I feel like it's sort of my style here. We got some cool sunglasses. Anyone looking for some sunglasses? Anyone? We've got, funny enough, I'm pretty sure this is my water bottle. We got another Yeti here. So, like I said, anyone who's looking for these things, these are my favorite. I could write a little message for you guys, but like I said, if anybody's missing anything, feel free to come pick these up after service. I'm going to leave them over here. But I share this with you to say this. Is it possible that lost things communicate something about the heart of God towards us? How we understand or perceive lost things, I believe, gives us a glimpse into the heart of God. And maybe ask more succinctly, what is God like? How does God respond when something is lost? And I think the answer actually might surprise you. So we're in a parable in Luke chapter 15 today, so you can turn or swipe there, or it'll be up on the screens. And there's actually 3 parables in Luke chapter 15, and they all follow the same structure. Something's lost, something's found, let's throw a party. Sound good? Something's lost, something's found, let's throw a party. Now, let me just read a first couple of verses in Luke chapter 15 for context, and then we'll dive into the parable. So Luke chapter 15, verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So a note, if the people who ran towards Jesus are the same people that are running away from our churches, that should give us pause. If the people that are gathering around Jesus and couldn't get enough of him, and the religious elite are muttering to them, "This can't be the Messiah. These people like him. This doesn't fit our narrative." If the people that ran towards Jesus couldn't get enough of him are the ones that are leaving our churches or are running from Christians, that should give us pause. So in response to these accusations in verse 1 and 2, he then tells 3 parables. And today we're going to look at just one. It's the middle one, so you can breathe easy. And it's also the shortest one. You're welcome. And so we're going to jump into verse 8. Verse 8 says, "Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin.' In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels of God over one sinner who repents." Now, this particular parable, tends to get overlooked. I haven't heard a lot of sermons on this one because you have the one right before it, which is the parable of the lost sheep. A lot of you have heard sermons on that. The one after it is the parable of the lost son or the prodigal son. A lot of you probably have heard things on that. But this one, it kind of tends to get overlooked. But I actually think it plays a really important part in the trilogy. I think that this parable has a couple of points that the other 2 don't really touch on. And I would love for us to kind of just sit with those today. So Jesus, he begins with what I would argue is a rhetorical question. Verse 8 says, "Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it?" The expected answer would be, of course. Of course, when you lose something, you take the appropriate steps to try and find it. Anyone in this situation, particularly in the first century, would do what this woman did. But to fully understand what's going on here, I want us to take a look at a couple of different elements that we see in this scenario that actually illuminates something really, really important for us. First, the silver coin is drachma in Greek. It's a Greek coin made of silver worth about a denarius or a day's wage. So it's quite valuable. But, a lot of people would say that it's not just its value, but it also has a sentimental value to it as well. Because this coin would be part of what is called the dowry. And so the dowry, when a woman is married, she would take pretty much all the money that she had and accumulated through her life and sewed it into a headdress that she would wear on her wedding day. She used 10 silver coins, which is likely why Jesus chose this number 10. And they represented not just the value of the coin, but pretty much all this woman had to bring into this marriage. This headdress, by the way, it was of such value that in the first century, there was actually a law that it was impossible to be taken from her even to pay a debt. So these aren't just random coins. These are coins of deep monetary value, but also deep sentimental value. What's interesting about this scene is that Jesus is describing something that was lost where? At home. The parable right before, the sheep wanders off. And at the parable afterwards, the son wanders off. But here the coin is lost at home. They didn't wander off, which is interesting because home is not really where you think you would lose something. Maybe some of us do, but not all of us. The coin was in an apparent place of safety. And I say that because I want to say this, that many of us, we show up on a Sunday morning and we think that we're good. As long as I have good church attendance, as long as I know enough Christian thoughts or Christian ideas I can fill in the blanks that I'm good. But the gospel knows no such version of salvation. That as long as I show up to this thing once a week and I show up, that I'm covered. Maybe perhaps the word for you today is that you're lost at home and don't even realize it. It's possible to be in the Father's home and still be distancing ourselves from the Father's heart. In fact, not only is it possible, I think it's way more common than many of us realize. You can be in the Father's home, yet still be distancing, stiff-arming yourself from the Father's heart. Some of us are convinced as long as I show up on Sunday, I'm good. This sort of safe believism that doesn't actually require anything of us. Now, when this woman discovers that the coin is lost, what does she do? She springs into action to find it because of its incredible value. I actually think the intensity of her searching reveals something of the heart of God in his interest for lost people. He's not just concerned. It moves him into action. He doesn't discover it's lost and says, well, I should probably mark some time out this week to go and try to find that. He springs into action because of its great value. So let me pause again, and I just want to say, especially to those, maybe you're at home right now, and you can't leave, or you feel like you don't have any value. You have unsurpassable value because you've been bought with an unsurpassable price. Maybe you're here today and you feel like the bottom is falling out below you, and you don't feel like you have much value or much to bring to the table. You have incredible value. That's a part of the heartbeat of God that we see in this story. The coin doesn't lose its value because it's lost. The coin doesn't lose its value because it's lost. Some of us need to remember that today. Sometimes we treat lost people or we treat ourselves as invaluable simply because we're lost. The coin doesn't lose value because it's lost. And we also see that this woman, she lit a lamp to search for a coin. This doesn't necessarily mean that she was searching at night. Typically, the house in the first century in Palestine, it would have these small 6-inch windows, but they would be really high up. So that meant that the house was plenty dark, even during the day. But the first thing that she does is she lights a lamp. She realizes that she's working in darkness in need of a light. Some of you see where I'm going with this. If we're going to find lost people, we need to be willing to go to dark places. Many of you know the gospel means good news, right? But news is only really good if it invades bad spaces. And some of us, Christ followers, are living such insulated lives that we can't even think of the last time that we've gone to somewhere that would be deemed dark. If we're going to care about the lost the same way that God does, that means sometimes we're going to need to light a lamp and go to dark places. Now, this woman, she also swept the house. And this wasn't like her OCD taking over and be like, man, I should really clean the house as I'm searching. In the first century, it was customary to lay straw over the floor because it would be made with rocks with these large crevices, so they would put straw in there to kind of make it a little bit easier to walk on. So if you dropped a coin, it would make it really, really difficult to find that coin. So this woman, she took a broom and she swept up the straw to make it easier to find. Now, it's worth noting how she searched. The text says that she searched carefully. Some translations might say diligently. Either way, she didn't just glance in her spare time. It took focus. She stopped everything she was doing to search for that lost coin. She searched through their house carefully. This is actually one point in this parable that distinguishes this parable from the one before and the one after. The key point that Jesus is making in this story, I think, is really important for us to sit with this morning. This woman's search, it's a glimpse. It's a glimpse into a picture of God searching for the lost. He searches diligently with great care, lighting a lamp, sweeping the floor. Two thoughts about this small but really, really significant detail. Number one, thank God for searching. Thank God that he searches. If you're a Christ follower, think about where you would be if he hadn't. Again, many of us, like me, we grew up in the church, so it's a little bit easier for us to kind of look over or not really know or grow callous to what it would be like if God had not searched after us. But some of us have very visceral pictures of what it would look like if God had not searched after us. Listen to how Paul puts it in Ephesians 2:12. Remember that at that time you were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel and foreigners to the covenant of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. We would do well to remember where we would be if it had not been for God, and thank God for searching. So when I was out of high school, my brother's 6 years older than I, we both still lived at home. We both still shared a bedroom. It's long story. But I remember it was like 3 a.m. And for some reason, I was still awake. And I remember I got this call from my brother, and he was like, my car broke down. And I was like, this actually wasn't uncommon, because I don't know about you guys nowadays, but like when I was growing up and you get your first car, I would go to the fairgrounds, and they would have like all the cars that were like $1,000 and less. And so I would be like, my first car was like a 1991 Buick station wagon. And I was happy about that. If you hit the pedal just right, you could actually get the car to jump a little bit. But if you tried to go up any hills, you'd be going backwards. So it wasn't uncommon for our cars to actually kind of break down. But my brother called me, and he was like, my car broke down. It was a 1997 Ford Focus. Yeah, that kind of tells you all you need to know about that car. But before he called me, he went through everything else he could have done. He was like, well, I'm not that far from home. I could walk home. I could try to fix my car at 3 a.m., or I can call my brother, who I know is going to be awake at 3 a.m., to come and get me. And so I went and I found him, and we got in my car and we drove home, the 2-minute drive home. But I share this for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is that some of us just need to get over ourselves and admit that we need rescuing. And some of us, we cling to our pride or our skill or our talent or our pedigree. And, maybe something today, the only thing you need to hear is this word surrender. Recognizing, I don't think I actually will be ever good enough to save myself or pull myself out of this pit. And I've tried every other option, but I got rescued when I was willing to admit I can't do this on my own. Can you sense God's searchlight on you today, right now? It's no mistake that you are here. It's no mistake that you are watching wherever you're watching from, whether that's a living room or a different country or a different country zone. It's not a mistake that you are hearing my voice right now, because God's searchlight is on you. God sees you today. He says, come home. Thank God that he searches. Number 2, we should seek with the same care. Not only gratitude that God searches, but we should seek with the same care. And I would ask this question. Have we lost some of the urgency, some of the intensity? Have we gotten comfortable and insulated, sort of like our Christian activities with our Christian friends, and kind of no one ever challenges us or makes us feel uncomfortable? Have we lost some of that, or have we put boundaries around who God can save or who God decides to save? You know, it's like our inner Pharisee gets sort of loud and says, well, God can only save these types of people, but never someone over there. Maybe you're saying that about yourself. And are we putting boundaries that God never puts? Have we become comfortable? Have we become guards for who we think God can and cannot save? This is why I think Paul wrote in Romans 1:15, that is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. Do you hear that? He's eager. He wants to preach this message. He has this incredible life change, and he's like, I got to tell somebody. I got to tell somebody. He has eager, and he's ready to share the good news to give a reason for the hope that he has. Have we Christians lost some of that? Because to find something that's lost, you have to go to where it is. Like, we know that intuitively, and are we actually going to dark places? Friends, if your life is surrounded by a bunch of Christians, it might be time to readjust. Maybe a question to ask is, when was the last time I made a religious person uncomfortable by the people that I spend time with? Are we shining light in dark places? It's not just about hanging out there. That doesn't really do anybody any good. It's not about just hanging out there, but it's about shining a light in these places. I'm thinking of the care that Jesus took with the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the marginalized and the overlooked. In fact, again, this parable, remember, it is a response to some of the muttering and the shares at the very beginning, something that I think that maybe a lot of us get caught in. Verse 1 says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. They were gathering around him. Jesus, the most perfect person, sinless, blameless, fully God, fully man. And yet those far from God could not get enough of him. They could not get close enough. They gathered to hear him, but the Pharisees and the religious people, they had all the knowledge, and the teachers of the law muttered to themselves, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. Here's what's really convicting to me. I think the religious elite were fine with Jesus serving the marginalized and caring for the outcast. I think they took issue with him being associated with them. Hey, we're fine. Like, yeah, if you want to go do a service project, go on a missions trip somewhere, like that's great, but don't associate yourself with them. Their issue is with this man, welcomes sinner and breaks bread with them. He eats with them and he spends time with them. If we're going to be serious about following Jesus, we should be asking ourselves, when was the last time I made a religious person uncomfortable by who I spend my time with? I heard this story of this guy in Detroit. He's a lawyer in Detroit. In every election, he hosts this dinner party at his house. And the only rule to get into that party is you have to invite someone who voted differently than you. The only way to get into the party is you have to invite someone who voted differently than you. And they would gather together, they would have drinks, they would have dinner together, and they would watch the election together. And many of those people, they would still leave with still disagreeing with each other, but now there is a face with a name. Brene Brown says that it's hard to hate people up close. Some of us have become so comfortable stiff-arming those people, or even maybe specifically that person that's in your mind. That person is no longer even a person. It's just an evildoer. What would it look like for us to maybe invite to our table to seek and save in a way that God sought and saved us? The love of Jesus, it draws near, it's approximate, it searches. Jesus is Emmanuel, which does not mean God for us or only God looking after us, but God with us. Jesus is God come close. When we're proximate, when we draw near, we can look into the eyes of someone we hate and even see the person that we love. You have never looked into the eyes of anyone that God does not love. Full stop. If we only love and associate with people in our own tradition or style or camp or ethnicity or class or party or denomination, Jesus says that we're no better than the tax collector or the pagan. And remember that the invitation of Jesus is not charity, it's family. It's welcome home, brother. Welcome home, sister. Get in here. And as kids, we should be searching for and loving the people the same way that God does. But I don't want us to forget the last part of the story, finding and rejoicing. Verse 9 says, and when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels of God over one sinner who repents. I think this parable is a way of Jesus telling the Pharisees and the scribes that they should be rejoicing instead of grumbling. And God is still seeking, and he is still saving. This should have brought conviction to the scribes of the Pharisees who lacked the concern and the ability to, look at things, and he's exposing them by this story. But what about us? It's so easy for us to fall into a sort of a chronological snobbery, for us to turn up our noses at the religious elite. Oh, I would never be like a Pharisee or a scribe. I'll be the first to admit that there's an inner Pharisee in me that sometimes gets really, really loud. Don't we sometimes consider ourselves closer to God than others? Isn't that what often leads to us, kind of distancing or keeping our distance from certain people? Is it possible that our own hearts towards some might be different than God's hearts towards them? How can we expect people to believe in a God that they don't see when a church they can see doesn't even seem to like them? This should move us into action. This should move us to even uncomfortable places to seek and save the lost. This woman, she rejoices. She's so filled with joy that she can't even contain herself. She runs to share with friends and neighbors, which is just a glimpse of how God responds when the lost are found. And this, by the way, as we said, is the theme of all the parables here in Luke 15. Something's lost, something's found, let's throw a party. I think that Christians should throw the best parties. We as Christians should throw the best parties the world has ever seen, because we have the greatest thing to celebrate. that we could ever celebrate. We have the best thing. God rejoices when sinners repent, and so should we. In fact, he wants to share his own joy over us, and he spells it out clearly in verse 10. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. You know, this explicit reference to the angels sharing in the party is another point that distinguishes this parable from the other two. And we would be set well to sit with that today. You know, some of us, I think we just become so domesticated in our faith that like when we get a front row seat to change, to life change, we're like golf clap people at best. No knock on golf. I really love golf, so there's no knock on golf. But golf people at best. This word rejoicing, it actually means to celebrate together. Like, have you been watching like a big game or something and you're by yourself and something really exciting happens, so you like stand up and you like go to high five somebody and there's nobody there? Has that ever happened to you? It's a little deflating, you know? Like, okay. This word literally means we are to celebrate together as a family of God. Jesus stresses really strongly that what is happening in heaven should be happening here on earth. When someone surrenders and trusts in Jesus, not just as a good moral teacher, but as a savior, that says that I was lost and I could never find myself, I can never change my circumstance on my own. He says the response should be a celebration. But as William Barclay observed, the Pharisees had quite a different saying. They were known to have said, there will be joy in heaven over one sinner who is obliterated before God. They sadistically looked forward, not to the saving, but the destruction of sinners. And for some of you, maybe that's been your experience with the church. And I really want to say, if that's been your experience with the church, I am so sorry. The response to a brother, sister coming home is a cosmic party. It's joining with the angels. But sometimes as Christians, we sound like we believe that God came more on a seek and destroy mission rather than a seek and save mission. Does Jesus talk about judgment? Absolutely. Absolutely. But always almost as a warning to call us to repentance, to turn around and say, I don't think you want what that delivers. I don't think you ultimately want where this lands you, to be freed from shackles and the sin of death. And when we witness that, friends, that should be an explosion of celebration with the angels in heaven. That God comes after us, that he is relentless, that he pursues us again and again and again, no matter how often we fall short or lose our place. That is grace. So I'll end with this story. There was a pastor from Scotland by the name of John Harper. And Harper had recently spent 3 months ministering to Moody Church in Chicago during the time which the church had experienced one of the most incredible revivals in its history. He had not been back in Britain long when he was asked to return to continue his ministry in America. He quickly made arrangements for himself and his 6-year-old daughter Annie to travel back to America, but decided to delay his departure for 1 week so he could sail on a new ship, the Titanic, which was about to make its maiden voyage. On Sunday, 14th of April, 1912, the day when the iceberg was struck, the weather was calm and the sea was fine. Harper attended the church service for the passengers. His niece reported that later that afternoon, she saw her uncle speaking individually to people about their souls. It seems that he was in a habit of seeking out the lost sheep wherever he was. Later, as the liner began to sink, John Harper ran along the flooded decks, preaching the gospel to anyone who would listen. He placed a 6-year-old daughter and niece into Lifeboat 11, but gave up the chance to go with her so another woman or child could be saved. He also gave away his own life jacket to another man, telling him, "You need this more than I do," before going down with the ship. And after 4 years after the Titanic went down, a young Scotsman rose in a meeting in Canada, and he told this following story. He said, "I am a survivor of the Titanic. And when I was drifting alone on a piece of wreck that awful night, the tide brought in Mr. John Harper, also on a piece of wreck near me. 'Man,' he said, 'are you saved?' 'No,' I replied, 'I am not.' He replied, 'Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved.' The winds bore him away and brought him back a little bit later. 'Are you saved now?' 'No,' I said, 'I cannot honestly say that I am.' He again said, 'Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you shall be saved.' A short while later, he went down, and there alone in the night, with 2 miles of water underneath me, I believed. I am John Harper's last convert." I think we should be a little bit more like John Harper with our lives. And maybe you're here or you're listening to my voice and you feel like you're lost at sea or that you're a lost item that could never be found. God is calling after you today. Don't let today pass without responding. God is seeking you in the cracks and the dust and the debris of a world of sin, and he initiates the search. He comes after us. He does the finding, and he does the restoring. God is coming after you because the incarnation is the ultimate cosmic disruption. It is the ultimate picture of a God setting aside what he's doing to go out of his way to find something. And he gives of himself. It costs him dearly. That's how much you mean to him. It is God who searches intently, who comes all the way down, not only to earth, but to death on a cross for you and for you and for you and for me. It is God who sends the Son to sweep, to search, to pursue us. Even in the dark places of our lives, it is God who throws the biggest party the universe has ever seen. When any of us choose to surrender, to loose our white knuckle grip, maybe today that is you. Don't let today pass. Maybe you feel lost. Let today be the day that you are found. And you know, today, as a church, we actually have an amazing opportunity to put all of this into action.